Hey woodworkers. Alright, so as you can see, I've got the webbing and then the burlap material. Thank you. I figured out what this is called. So the burlap goes over all of this. It's tacked in a million places. I've switched to the 3/8 inch staples now for getting these in. At this point, a lot more has to, there's a lot more at stake. If I don't have a deep enough grab on these things, I just don't, I can't afford for those staples to start pulling out. So, okay, so at this point, this is what this looks like thus far. We've got good support in here. I possibly could have gone just a little bit tighter with my stretch of the webbing, but I'm not worried. So the other thing that I want to talk about here is a bit of a fork in the road, because there's this material here, which is called an edge roll. And so there's this foam material here in the center, and it has more of this jute or burlap stuff wrapped around it. This will typically be wrapped around the perimeter here, just a bit proud of this front edge. So if I did want to use this, I start tacking this thing in and then wrapping corners to do this, and then all the way around. The edge roll here does two things. Number one is it creates a bit more loft with the foam. And so depending on the overall shape that you want of this thing, if you want it to have more of a squared off edge thing, this edge roll is nice to kind of build in that area. But if you want to have more of an eased or a sloped corner here, then this edge roll probably is not going to be in your best interest. The other thing it does is it creates a nice barrier here, if it's just a little extended from this edge, as I mentioned, for anything that might hit this thing. And usually seat heights are right around knee height. Sometimes your shins get involved as well. So anyway, this is a nice physical cushion for all of that stuff. So it's a good thing to know about. I don't know that a lot of upholsterers do this anymore. This is very much in a traditional upholstery technique vein, but that is all there is to know. Okay, so now we get into foam, and not all foam is created equal, and the color has nothing to do with quality here. This is a piece of, yes, you guessed it, latex. This is the highest quality foam that you can get. For doing any type of a seat, we typically go with a 2-inch cushion and high density. If this is a medium or a low density, when people sit in this, it's going to feel too soft, too thin. But 2 inches is important. Higher the density on this makes this function much like a seat that we're used to sitting in should. If we use the high density on a back, however, if there is going to be an upholstered back, the high density is going to feel like a rock, finding your spine and all of your parts. So anyway, so if we're a back, it needs to be a medium density or even a low density or a combination of the two. These you can glue up if you wanted to have maybe not 2 inches, but let's say this is a 1 inch, or 1.5 inch and a half inch. You can kind of tweak and modify the density of these things. So if this were a back, this would be a medium density and then a low density as a 1 inch on top of this, and it will give you the support you need, but a little bit more of a gentler approach to that. Okay, so latex, better for an archival upholstery piece, and it won't break down as quickly as other kinds. Okay, so what I want to do now, you can buy these sizes at fabric stores, places like Joann's or Shane places. Those are great. I would really encourage you to spend the extra bucks on the foam at an upholstery supply place, but those are your options. If you do go to Joann's, they do sell this size, which is kind of ideal for a slip seat like what we're doing. The next thing that I want to do here is trace out the shape of this taper, and I want to cut this foam off. If I don't cut it off, trying to wrap this stuff is going to get really bulky and heavy towards this section, especially where there's more of this overhang. I do want a little bit of extension or overhang in the front, same in the back. Whatever overhang I do here, I want to match around. And so what I'll do is take this, and that gets us to where we want to be. Now, just like everything we do, there is some debate. If I were to take this foam and line it up to this edge, I can pretty much get more of a boxy look by having this teed up a little bit more. I just really am uncomfortable about exposing any of this rigid surface here by setting this in line. I always want to have this thing extend over so that when we wrap this, then it'll start to protect and also soften the look. But talk to your upholsterer, or if you're doing this for your own pieces, I would encourage you to explore some options. All right. Oops, I don't have power. That would be lovely if I had power. All right, so how are we going to cut this? Short answer is no, we're not going to use those. We also don't want to use a utility knife or any type of a single blade. I'm going to edit all this out, and especially that. Any type of a single blade is problematic because this stuff just doesn't do well. If I start to cut here, it will compress, but then it will start to cut really jaggedly. Utility knives are much worse. A good intermediate tool, which you might already have laying around the house if you don't want to buy an upholstery saw, is to use a carving knife, an electric carving knife. It has reciprocating serrated blades, and that will cut through this thing so easily. Professional upholsterers have a bandsaw that functions very much like this guy. So we have teeth here, and it has this little track with these little wedges to start helping this thing find its way. When using this, and it's a cool little gadget, we've got wheels here, slide this thing under, and it should be able to rock and roll. There's a lot of friction on this. This material is really crazy for the cutting. Recommend throwing a dry lube on this thing, and every single time dry lube here, and that way it will cut cleanly. All right, so let me do this and I'll show you how easy this is. Take it all back. That was not quite as easy as I was hoping it was going to be. Not worried about this. This is not pretty, but this is kind of the ideal cut that we're looking for. So I'll cut both of these things. And then the next step that I need to do is I need to attach the new shaped foam to our frame. And what I'm going to do here, I don't want to just leave this in loose, because as I start wrapping this around, it's going to start to shift a little bit. So I will throw in some spray adhesive on both of these surfaces, let that dry, and then I'll reattach these. Typically when I attach them, I'll probably start doing that here in the next video, but I invert this thing so I can line up these edges with my frame, get this thing centered, drop it in. Once I have that, and be patient, wait for the appropriate time to start adhering that. But once you have these things connected, it really has nowhere else to go. So, all right. So I will cut this one. Hopefully it'll go better than that. I'm going to use a little bit more of my dry lube on that. And then we'll start talking about next steps.